And many of you, like Brother Jerry said, I'm a political director, political reporter at Fox 2. And a lot of people ask me, they say, John, what do you think about socialism in America? Are we ready for something like that? And I always like to answer a question with a question. And a lot of times I say, you mean things like collectivism and pooling resources for the common good, right? And they say, yeah. Are we ready for that? And I say, absolutely not. They said, why is that? And I said, have you been to the toilet paper aisle at Schnucks lately? We obviously don't get sharing resources very well here. So no, we're not ready for that quite yet here in America. So again, it's a privilege to be here today. In case you're wondering, this is not going to be your typical sermon because I'm not a pastor. That's Pastor Timothy's job. This is simply a talk about my experiences of being able to pick the brains of some of the most successful people on the planet. And come to find out, many of the principles that we're going to talk about today are all biblically based. So it's been nice over the years to hear these people talk and have a chance to talk to them and find out that they shared some of the same beliefs that I do. So it's my hope today that no matter what you're facing, whether it be as a parent, whether it be as a grandparent, whether it be as a student, whether it be as somebody new to the workforce trying to rise up, whether it's working with the church, whether it's with a charity, that you can all take something away from this speech that's going to help you handle that issue in a better manner. This talk is all about living up to the expectations that God has for us. It's about going from where you are right now to where you want to be to fulfill God's potential in your life. But first, I'll tell you really quickly how this all came about. Pastor Timothy has heard my talk a few times, and he said, John, I'm going to be away, so we want to know if you'd like to give your presentation to the church. And I said, yeah, that'd be great. He said, before you commit to this, we have to know how you feel about something. I said, okay, what's the question? He said, we need to know how you feel about free speech. And I thought, now that's a weird question. I've known Pastor Timothy for 20 plus years, been in the news media for more than 2 decades. And I said, what a strange question. I said, I would love to give this presentation to the church. And yes, I'm a huge advocate of free speech. And he said, that's great because we need you to give one. So if nothing else, the price is right today and there's a full refund at the end if you don't like what I have to say. So what I'm going to talk about today is partly my story, or my testimony, if you want to use that phrase in the church. And although I do give this speech to diverse audiences, whether it be college groups, business groups, community groups, there's no way you can hear these principles and not realize that they are, in fact, biblically based. And they're the keys that have allowed normal people to go from where they were to really some extraordinary things over the years and become all that God wants them to be. You see, I went from a small town, make sure my clicker works here, I went from a small town in mid-Missouri, Bell, Missouri, right there on your left. Yeah. Population 1233. Didn't have a good educational background. So they say, how did you go from small town, mid-Missouri, not much of an educational background, to being on national TV, to inventing a product that's being sold around the globe, to even writing 6 books? And I will give an aside here very quickly. My friends have always been the ones to say, we don't get it, John. You're the only person in history who has actually written more books than you've read. And so it kind of gives you a background into what my education was leading into all of this. I didn't have much. But come to find out, all along the way, I would hear these principles and really having no idea what I wanted to do. But my pastor and mentor, he gave me one phrase back when I was in my late teens that put me from where I was, really not knowing what I wanted to do, to putting me on the path to where I wanted to be. And he would tell me this time and time again as we would meet over the years, this one key phrase. So again, having no idea what you're going to do, to being put on a path, that's something really valuable. So I hope you take something from that. So again, as I said, the first half of this talk is based on that one principle and how it's played out in my life. Because even though I do have some family members here, they may not know all the bizarre stories that have happened, and it all goes back to this one principle. And then we'll get into these other principles that I've interviewed some of these great people about, and you'll see how they all tie back to this one. As I often tell my kids here, if you go to a talk or a presentation or watch a video, if you pick up just one key piece of information that opens up the door for you, that's worth your time. You see, I was told that a long time ago by my mentor. He said, John, if you go to any presentation, you get one good idea, then it was worth the time that you spent to be here, because I hate wasting time and I hate wasting other people's time. Later on, I found out how brilliant that was, right? All you need is one key piece of information. Because at the end of the presentation, if you catch me out there and you say, John, that was absolutely horrible. I can't believe you wasted 45 minutes. I said, you didn't get one nugget of information? They said, yeah, I got one nugget. And I said, great. It was a huge success. We can all go on our separate ways. You get one key piece of information that may open up the door. You have to consider that a success. So, that one key nugget that changed everything for me is simply this. It's work in the natural and let God take care of the supernatural. Work in the natural, let God take care of the supernatural. When my pastor mentor told me this when I was in my 20s, or in my teens and into my 20s, I kind of got it, but I didn't fully understood what it meant. And he said, John, the key is you often have to do your part before God will come in and do his part. He's our Heavenly Father, right? Just like when we parent our children. If we do everything for them, that doesn't benefit them. It certainly doesn't benefit the Father, and it doesn't benefit society because they're not getting all they want out of life. You see, I could step in and do everything for them. I could take their test. I could pay for everything. I'm not going to. We could do all this, right? But down the road, that's a disaster for their lives. And I believe our Heavenly Father is the same. Sometimes he wants to know if you're serious. Do you really want this out of your life? Well, you got to show me something because I could do. He's saying, I could do something miraculous. I could step in and make sure and pave the way and make sure you have all you've ever wanted. Have all the riches, have all the success you want. But sometimes he has to say, I can, but I need to see that you're serious first. And then he can step in and do his part. So people say, John, how did you go from a degree in biology and a minor in chemistry? That's my research just to prove I actually went to college. I'm not going to talk about the detection of mutagenic capabilities of EMFs using the Ames test because, quite frankly, that's a long time ago. I barely remember it, and I probably didn't explain it that good back then. So how did you go from biology and chemistry to broadcasting? So here's the backstory, right? This is my testimony. 1994, graduated college, and I wasn't for sure that I wanted to start medical school at that point. College was tough for me. Like I said, I didn't have a good educational background. I did very well, but it took a lot of work. And I thought, I don't know if this is what I want to do. So all the doctors that I had interned with, both here in St. Louis and out in mid-Missouri, said, John, if you're not serious about this, you need to put the brakes on. Before you commit 7 to 10 years of your life just for the schooling, then the rest of your life to do this, you need to make sure that this is exactly what you want to do. And they said, don't go to medical school right now, but work in the field. Just go get a job in the medical field and find out if this is something that you really want to do. My dad always used to say, don't worry about the pay. Take any job in the field you want. Because he always said this, he said, your passion will pave the way and your passion will eventually pay off. Right? Take any job. So I did, St. John's Mercy Medical Center. I took a job as a lab transport specialist. You say, what's that? I was an Uber driver for specimens, more or less. My job was to go around to all the different, primarily dermatology clinics throughout the St. Louis area, pick up these lab specimens, bring them back to the pathology lab where the testing would take place. But really what the job ended up being was me sitting in my car listening to the radio by myself for 8 hours a day. And I found myself just enthralled by how some of these speakers would keep you in your car an extra 5 minutes. I love that, how they knew so much, and they knew their history and all that. And I thought, now that's something I could do. I was okay at public speaking in college. I know my history. I love politics. Maybe that's something I should do. So I kept working at St. John's, but then started taking some broadcasting classes in the evening. About that same time, a good friend that I was working with said, John, I have a talent agent here in St. Louis. Maybe you'd like to meet with them and see if this is something that would work out. So I did. I met with Talent Plus. A lot of people are familiar with them. And so I signed with Talent Plus. But my agent there, Sharon Tucci, said, John, if you want to do this as a career in the entertainment field, you're going to have to go somewhere else because you guys are all smarter than I am. I didn't exactly realize that St. Louis wasn't the fashion capital of the world at that point. We weren't the entertainment capital of the world. So if I wanted to make this, I had to go somewhere else. Right? My pastor is telling me, John, you have to work in the natural, let God take care of the supernatural. That to me said, okay, I need to take action. So she said, you need to go someplace like in New York, like Los Angeles, like Milan, like Athens, Miami. And I said, okay, I know somebody who lives in Miami. I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to rent out my house. I'm going to pack up my little Sunbird convertible, and I'm heading to Miami, 1995. So these are the days before cell phones were widespread. I get to Fort Lauderdale. I'm on my way, all my worldly possessions packed in the trunk of my Sunbird. I get to Fort Lauderdale, and I call my friend who I'm going to be staying with. He's living there with his mother. And so I call, and his mom answers. And I said, hey, is Dirk there? She said, oh, this is John, right? I said, yeah. She said, Dirk's father had a medical emergency. He had to leave. He's now back in Chicago, and we don't know when he's coming back. I'm a single woman. I don't know you. I don't feel comfortable with you staying with me. So I'm like, wow. Here I am in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I have no house to go back to because it's rented out. I've already quit my job. And here I am with all my stuff and nowhere to go. And I said, okay, well, any suggestions on what I might be able to do here? She said, you know what you should do? You should call Pastor Jose Garcia at Miami Shores Christian Church. That's a church that my friend Dirk was working with. And maybe just see if he has any ideas. And so I called Pastor Jose. And he said, yeah, you can stay in our missionary room. You're more than welcome to stay there, but you can't stay long because we have a missionary coming in. Now, to give you an idea of what the missionary room was at Miami Shores Christian Church, it's a cot and a broom closet. Okay, this is where the missionaries from Haiti would come because Miami Shores is right next to Little Haiti in Miami. And so these missionaries would come from Haiti there, and they would stay in the broom closet with the cot, and then they would go work in the community in Little Haiti. And so he said, okay, you know, you can stay here, but you have to be gone tomorrow because we have a missionary coming in tomorrow. So I know I'm not the only one who's been in this place. I'm laying on my cot next to a mop, and I'm mad. I'm mad at myself for quitting my job, for not going to school like I should have. I'm mad at my dad for saying, hey, sure, pursue your passion. That'll pay off. Really? I'm mad at my agent for sending me to some place where I don't know anybody. But most importantly, I'm mad at God, right? We've all been there where we've cursed God and said, you know what? You said step out in the natural. You'll take care of the supernatural. Where are you? Where are you? I'm here by myself. I have no money. I have no job. I have nothing. I've already fallen all the way behind my classmates who are in medical school now. I have no idea what I really want to do. And I'm laying in a cot, in a church, in a town where I don't know anybody. Finally fall asleep that night. Next morning, Pastor Jose comes in. He said, John, how long are you thinking about staying in Miami? I said, well, don't really have a plan B right now, so why do you ask? And he said, I just got the weirdest phone call today. He said, the Sisters of St. Francis, who used to run St. Francis Hospital in Miami Beach, well, they're packing up. They've closed the hospital already. They're packing up and they're moving to St. Bonaventure, New York to open a new hospital. And he said, I got a call out of the blue asking if I know somebody who would like to stay in their place. I'm like, wow, okay. He said, are you interested? And I'm like, well, it's either my Sunbird's convertible, right, the seats that lay back, or nothing, so let's go take a look. So we jump in his car and we head over to Miami Beach. And I'm going to give you a little, I guess, geography lesson here. So this area right here, that's Allison Island, okay? This is Miami Beach. This little part of Allison Island is where the hospital used to be that the Sisters of St. Francis ran, St. Francis Hospital. This area right here was the 20-bedroom house that they lived in. This skyscraper right there is the gardens that were next door. And I'm like, okay, so they want me to stay in a 20-bedroom house on South Beach. I said, what's the cost? He said, they want you to stay here free for 2 years because they need somebody to watch over the property so their vandals don't come in. They're about to sell it to a developer, but it's going to take 2 years for this to happen. So think about that. The night before, I'm cursing God, saying, where are you? He said, can you wait till tomorrow morning? For crying out loud, I have a 20-bedroom house on South Beach waiting for you tomorrow morning, and you're mad at me? So I take the deal. I say, sure, I'll watch this 20-bedroom. Now, for those of you who have never been down there, like I said, this is Allison Island. This is northern Miami Beach. This blue stuff is called the ocean. This sandy stuff, that is called the beach. 20-bedroom house right across from the beach. All right, so I move in, got a 20-bedroom house free for 2 years. I still don't have a job. I got bills. I got credit cards. I got a car payment. I got student loans. I have all the stuff that goes along with it. So I finally signed with the talent agent down there, and just to prove that I actually did that, here you go. That's me back in the day. This is the Kodak ad that went all over the country. That is I don't know what. That's a weird shirt and weird hair with a girl dressed very weirdly too. So we started getting a little work, or I started getting a little work. The only problem was in 1995, every agent around the world said, hey, you should go to Miami Beach. They're looking for guys who are 6 foot tall, 175 pounds, 42 regular suit, waist of 32, and you have to stay that size, dark hair, dark complexion. So guess how many people showed up in Miami Beach at the same time I showed up? Like 1 million. So we'd be in line at these casting calls. There's one job available, and I would look down. I'd be counting. I'm like, 78, 79, I'm number 80. One of us is going to get to work. That's why we stayed so skinny. We didn't have any money. We couldn't eat. Even though we wanted to be that skinny, we had to because we weren't making any money. And I'll never forget, after a few months of this, I'm living in a 20-bedroom house, occasionally working. I go to the ATM to take out some cash. I have no money left. 3 credit cards, each about $15,000, right? I'm like $45,000 in credit card debt. I got a lot of money in student loans. And I'm thinking, oh my, here I am again. You know, I stepped out in the natural. God, you said you take care of the supernatural. Got a 20-bedroom house that I can't afford to leave because I'm broke. And so I'm thinking, okay, is this the point where I pack it in and go back home and tell my dad it didn't work, that this career is not going to work out for me? And then a voice went off and said, wait a second, you liked radio. Why don't you go to a radio station and just ask for a job, apply for a job? So I went to WQAM radio, which was just a little bit north of where I lived. And I go in, this is the days before online job postings, right? So I go in, the receptionist is there. I said, yeah, I'd like to apply for a job. She said, what job? I'm like, I don't know anything. I'm familiar with mops. I'll mop the floors. I don't care, just give me a job. And she said, let me get Andrew Ashwood real quick. Now again, remember, I'm mad at God again, right? Because he said, step out in the natural, I'll take care of the supernatural. I got no money. So I go in, Andrew Ashwood, who is a legend in the broadcast industry, comes up to the front, gets me, grabs my resume, takes me back to his office and said, okay, it's obvious you're smart, you got a degree, you played some sports in college, you understand sports. He said, it's so weird that you would come in today because my morning show producer just told me yesterday that he's quitting. Do you want to be my morning show producer? I'm like, I don't even know what that is, but yes, I'll take that job. He said, great, I got meetings today, come back tomorrow, we'll finalize everything and the paperwork. I'm like, great, I got a job. I come back the next day, I show up at the front, receptionist is there. I said, I'm here to see Andrew Ashwood. She said, he left on business. He's gone for a week. I don't even know why he told you to come back. I said, well, he said he was going to give me a job today. And she said, let me get HR. So the human resources director comes up, gets me, brings me back, and says, what job are you taking? I said, well, apparently the morning show producer's quitting. He's like, oh yeah, I heard that. Okay, did Andrew talk about the pay? And I said, no, he didn't really talk about that. He said, wait a second, you accepted a job and you didn't even ask about the pay? I said, my dad said, let your passion pursue, right? Just take any job, don't worry about the pay, your passion's gonna promote you. He's like, okay. He said, full-time, part-time? I said, he didn't say that either. He said, well, he should have been here today. Let's go ahead and make you full-time with benefits. And here I was cursing God once again. As I'm cursing God, a guy is quitting a job that I'm apparently qualified to do. So I get a job, market number 16, producing the morning show, the first team on WQAM. Now this guy right here, he was the star of the show. That's Joe Rose. He was a former athlete. He was a Miami Dolphins tight end. He caught Dan Marino's first touchdown pass. And if you ever meet Joe Rose, he will tell you, hi, I'm Joe Rose. I caught Dan Marino's first touchdown pass. Still proud of it. What is it, like 40 years later? And if Joe's watching this, you know that's true. And so I started producing his show. And so part of the job of a morning show producer is you have a bank of phone lines, right? So I'm in my room, and I'm occasionally on the air with Joe, and I had this bank of phone lines here, and part of my job was to answer the phones and say, okay, you want to talk about what? And then I would put the call through. But there was also the hotline. There were 2 hotlines in my studio. And when those rang, we dropped everything because it was somebody important, the VIP lines. So I'll never forget, 1 year ago, right, I'm graduating from Central Methodist University. I don't really know anybody famous. I don't know anything. And here I am producing the morning show, the #1 morning show for a bigwig, Joe Rose, who's also the evening sports anchor. And, you know, in a world I didn't even know existed a few years ago. So the hotline rings. I pick up the hotline. Hey, it's Dan Marino. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have Dan Marino. And he's like, I know. Put it on hold, put the phone call through. Next phone rings. It's, hey, this is Don Shula. Let me talk to Joe. I'm like, oh my gosh. And he's like, yeah, I know. So it was like this all the time. All these celebrities were calling in. I'm his producer, so we're going out to all these events together. I'm hanging out with all these famous sports stars and all these people, and now they're starting to know who I am. A quick aside, I wasn't going to tell this story, but people seem to like this one. So I'm in the locker room. One of the jobs is also in the locker room interviewing some of these sports stars. And this was when the Chicago Bulls were it, right? Michael Jordan was still on top of the world, Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman. I'm in the locker room. Now, I played college basketball. This guy's like the legend for me. So I'm interviewing him. I have my little Marantz recorder, a microphone, and I'm in the locker room. We're all standing around Michael Jordan. And I'm just sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, that's Michael Jordan, right? And everybody else, it's the gaggle of reporters all around, right? You've got all these TV guys who are interviewing him. And I'm so in the moment that they all leave and I don't even realize it. And so I'm standing here going one-on-one with Michael Jordan, and he looks at me. Everybody else is gone. I look around, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's just us two. He looks at me, and I'll never forget, he says, yo, you got anything for me? I'm like, no. I walked away. I was one-on-one with Michael Jordan, and I wasn't ready. That's another principle. Be ready when your moment comes. I wasn't ready. I walked away. But so these sort of things started happening time and time again, and so I did my 2 years there. I got my experience. I moved back here to St. Louis. I met my beautiful wife, Teresa. We got married right here 21 and a half years ago. I didn't even have to look that up. I know. The first wedding that Pastor Tim performed here at Rock Hill Baptist Church at that time was Teresa and I. So we moved back here. We stayed here for a little bit. I did some news on some different morning shows here, but I wanted my own thing, right? Ready to grow. I want my own morning show. So I got my own morning show out in central Pennsylvania. Good morning, everybody. It's John Brown, 95.3 WZ, Central Pennsylvania's #1 radio station. Old habits die hard. So did that, ended up being the #1 morning show in central Pennsylvania. Things are going well, but it wasn't a good fit for us. We wanted to get back closer to the family, and so I said, I want to get into the TV world. And so we went down to Springfield, had a day off, and went to Springfield, and I somehow got an interview with the news director at the ABC affiliate in Springfield, Missouri. And I go in there and I interview with him, and he's like, what job are you looking for? I said, I don't know, I just want to get into TV. He said, it's so weird, you should show up. My 10 p.m. producer just told me they're quitting. Do you want to be the 10 p.m. producer? Now, I know about as much about 10 p.m. producing as I did when I started this. That would be none. I had no idea what to do. But what did I say? Sure. It's another pay cut, but sure. You know what? Just get in. This is what you want to do. Your passion will promote you. I took the job not knowing what I was going to do. Now, this is also kind of a weird time because this is 1999, the very end of 99. Not a whole lot of internet out there yet, right? And so I was one of the few people who knew how to use the internet. So what they did was they parked a camera on me, and I had my own little desk here with the internet. I was the web guy. And so the anchors in the studio would throw out to me, and I would just read them the top stories that were going on around the country. Well, one day the general manager walks through, and he says, you're John Brown, right? I said, yeah. And he said, nice work. You know, I know you're new here, but didn't you used to work in St. Louis? I said, yeah, I did some morning shows. He said, I used to listen to your morning show when you were on with J.C. Corcoran. And he said, so what's about to happen here is we're starting a new morning TV program in about a month. And the woman that we had chosen to do this just told me that she doesn't want to do it. She doesn't feel comfortable doing a startup newscast. Would you like to be the new morning anchor? No experience in TV. I show up at a place just trying to get a job and learn the industry. I show up at a place that's getting ready to create a job that was a perfect fit for me because they wanted to do a morning show that was a mix of talk radio on TV. I just showed up. We took the job. We stepped out in faith once again. God says, work in the natural. Do your part, and then I'll do my part. All this stuff just miraculously happened, right? But I had to do my part first. Had we not showed up in Springfield, I never would have had this opportunity. So sure enough, I got the morning anchor job there. Ray Foreman was the meteorologist. It went well. Did that for a couple of years. Got promoted to the evening anchor. All right, now I'm really hungry, right? I'm ready to move on. I want something big. I want a big market. I want national TV, all this stuff. So I signed with an agent. And this agent had a lot of big names. I mean, all the names that you would know from TV. And he said, John, you're exactly what the networks are looking for. You're exactly what the big markets are looking for. So we're going to sign you, and we're going to start marketing you. Had a year left on the contract, right? This timeline, remember this timeline here because this one will blow you away. Had a year left on the contract. So I couldn't really act on anything right now, but on the big markets and on the syndication side, they like to get things moving a year in advance. So they know how to make the transitions, to do the promotions, and you have to do that too to be able to get out of your contract, or when your contract's up, you're able to make that move. So he starts marketing me, and there's no interest. And remember, he called me and said, John, I don't understand. Nobody seems to be interested in you. And I'm like, that's okay. We have about a year. And all this time, I'm still working harder on myself than I am on my job, incorporating all these principles. I was still doing a morning radio show when I was the evening anchor. I would get up, I'd take care of Lauren. She was on my lap as I'm doing a radio show from my house. My wife, we had this weird schedule. I would take a vacation day to come up here and fill in on KMOX and 97.1, just doing everything I possibly could. And so, not getting any interest. And then one day, my news director, who's a good friend of mine, walks by and says, John, I need to see you in the office. I'm like, okay. We go in there. And he said, John, we need to change your contract a little bit. He said, the new company that just bought us doesn't want bonus structures in contracts. And so we need to redo your contract to eliminate the bonuses. Now, keep in mind, I've never gotten a single bonus in the entire 4 years I've been there, right? So I'm not standing on money. I'm standing on principle. And I said, no. We're not changing my contract because you guys wouldn't change the contract for me if I came back and said, hey, ratings are up. Why don't you give me some more money? It doesn't work that way. He said, well, we have to eliminate these. The new company doesn't allow bonuses in contracts. And I said, well, I'm not going to do it. He said, okay, I kind of figured you'd say that. We're going to have to let you go. See, what you find out later is there are contracts in broadcasting that have a clause called at will. Important thing to know later on. Because at will simply means they can fire you, you just can't quit. And so they fired me. And he said, you got a couple weeks left here. At this point, I'm married, we have a new house, we have a new daughter, we have cars, we got student loans, we have all this stuff. And I'm like, I am getting fired from market 73 before I ever reach my goals. All because I stood on principle. Right? How does this work out? It doesn't look real good when you start applying for bigger jobs and they say, you got fired in market 73, why? They're not going to listen to my reason. They're just going to know that you got fired in a smaller market. I'm like, wow. Had to go home, tell my wife, I just got terminated because I said, no, I'm not changing my contract. A couple days later. So think about this. I was still a year in my contract, right? There's nothing I could do. A couple days later, the gentleman who ran the radio station here in St. Louis, MS Broadcasting, called me and said, John, are you familiar with the show called The Daily Buzz? And I said, yeah, it's on like 100 markets all over the country. I'm familiar with it. And he said, well, nobody knows this yet, but the morning host of The Daily Buzz is about to quit. He just got offered a job in New York with ABC News. They need somebody like right now because they're moving the show from Dayton, Ohio down to Orlando, Florida. They're about to launch into another 100 markets, and they need somebody who can be on the job immediately. And I'm like, well, yeah, hook me up. So I get the interview. We fly down to Orlando. I do my audition, and they hire me on the set. The guy who runs the show comes up. He's like, you're exactly what we're looking for. Let's go upstairs and talk about the contract. Okay, so think about the timeline here. I had a year left on my contract. I had no idea this job was about to come open, right? I get terminated, which means that I could act on any opportunity immediately. This job needed somebody immediately, so I took the job, and only God could have known that that was about to happen. How did he let me out of my contract? By me standing on principle, saying I'm not going to change my contract, and then letting them fire me. How do you explain something like that? I went from market 73 to suddenly hanging out with some of the biggest celebrities on the planet, living in Orlando, Florida. That's stuff that just doesn't happen. And what's so funny is everybody else comes up later and says, wow, you sure got lucky. I'm like, really? Lucky? You didn't see working late, working 2 jobs, taking vacation time to keep just networking and filling in up here. Do everything you can, let God do his part, right? That's what I was doing. Those were the principles that my mentor had told me, and they were starting to pay off. Now, what's amazing about this is after spending a couple of years down there, you see these things happen time and time again, and I could go into a bunch of them, but what I've discovered is that God often won't help you out until you're willing to fully commit to do your part, right? He's going to wait for you to do everything that you can possibly do before he sees that you're serious. And when he realizes you're serious, that's when opportunities happen. We've all seen that equation, success is where preparation meets opportunity, right? Success is where preparation meets opportunity. The cool thing about that equation is you can only control one part of that equation. You can only control what you're doing, right? Success is where preparation. What can you control? Your preparation. You can't control the opportunity. That's the part that God handles. Makes that equation very easy. He'll do his part when you're willing to do your part. So yes, I do believe there's a higher power that steps in to help us out. It happens time and time again. And now we're going to move on to some of these other principles that all kind of lead back to this first one. These are a lot of fun because I've got to interview some really amazing people over the years. And they all tell me things like this. Outwork everyone else. And here's a hint. It's not really that hard. Outwork everyone else. It's not really that hard. One of the mentors said, there's no substitute for putting in the effort. This goes back to an interview I did with John Q. Hammonds. Hammonds Hotels, if you guys have ever been to Springfield, Missouri, you see Hammond's name on everything. He passed away a couple of years ago, but he was a legend in the hotel industry. And he would constantly preach this. And he even said, I asked him, I said, what's your key to success? If somebody is in your industry, somebody works for you, what is the key that you can see that they're promotable? And he said, it's simply this, get to work. No matter what job you're hired for, be the best at that job. If you're hired to be the janitor, be the best janitor. If you're hired to be an accountant, be the best accountant. And don't ever tell me that you would never do that. That one caught my attention. I said, what do you mean by that? He said, as soon as somebody in my industry, I ask them to do something extra, and they say, well, I would never do that. He knows immediately they're not promotable. If you say, I would never go in on the weekends, he knows immediately you're not promotable. I mean, that was one of those lights going off in my head. I'm like, wow, these principles really do work. I'm going to tie all this together in a second. Tony Little, a lot of you remember him from the Gazelle, right? What's the shopping networks, right? He called it continual daily improvement. Now, I'm going to tie in his beliefs because somehow we can get it when it comes to fitness and health and exercise in the same ways we don't always get it when it comes to business and family life. He calls it continual daily improvement, and his ideas go right back to John Q. Hammonds, which he called the Hammonds math. Okay, John Q. Hammonds says, in America today, how much are we supposed to work? 8 hours a day, right? You hear that all the time, 40 hours per week. He said, what would happen if somebody in my organization put in an extra 30 minutes per day? Would you notice a difference tomorrow? The odds are no. I mean, if you're working out, you might be a little sore tomorrow, but you're not in any better shape. He said, now let's extrapolate that. 30 minutes per day is 2.5 hours per week. Are you any better after the first week? Maybe a little bit. Maybe you've picked up a few skills here and there, but not really. You're not that much further ahead. Same thing in fitness, right? After a week, you might notice a little better muscle tone. He said, okay, let's take it further. That equals about 10 hours per month. That's 120 extra hours more per year. That means the person who puts in an extra 30 hours per day has put in an extra 3 weeks more per year. Now tell me, on the fitness side, are you in better shape if you've put in 120 extra hours more working out per year? And the answer would be absolutely. Right? It makes sense on the health and fitness side. So why doesn't it make sense on the business side? Are you more promotable if you put in this much more time? People say, where would I find an extra 30 minutes per day? I don't know. Facebook? You know, maybe staying a little bit later? Little things like that? And no, you don't have to do it every day, but the principle is you put in just a little bit more than the people you're competing against for the promotions. The question is absolutely, or the answer is absolutely, you're so much more valuable. Same thing for your family. Would your family unit be more cohesive if you spent extra time together? If you said, we're going to spend an extra 30 minutes, even weekly at this point, right? I know everybody's busy, but would your family be in a better position a year later if you put in these same principles? There's no question. It's true in fitness, it's true in health, and it's of course true in your family life and business life. Because your true character is determined when no one else is looking. I love this one. It's really easy to be busy when your boss is standing over your shoulder. What happens when the boss isn't there? Are you putting in the same effort? General Colin Powell gave me this when he said, you can fool people by looking busy, but your performance will always be in relation to the work you put in. I love that. You can fool people by looking busy, but your performance will always be in relation to the work you put in. And he went a step further in my interview with him. This is a guy, for those of you who are younger, he's risen to the top of military, risen to the top of government. He is just one of the, let's be honest, he's one of the coolest guys you'll ever be around. I mean, I'm in the presence of this guy and I'm like, wow, I want to be like you someday. I mean, he just exudes power and confidence. And he said, I can tell people in my organization if they're putting in the extra work simply by how they greet me in the morning. Like, how's that? He said, because your subconscious won't betray you. He said, I can see people when I walk down the hallway and they're walking to meet me, if they're putting in the extra work, if they're doing the extra thing, not stealing from me by putting in the full day's work, by the way they're dressed, by the way they carry themselves, head up high, their shoes are shined, everything's perfect. And he said, and I can also tell who's mailing it in, who's stealing from me as an employer, because those are the people walking down the hall who don't want to look me in the eye. He says, I know immediately who's putting in the extra work. I know immediately who is going to be promotable by the way they present themselves to me. Senator Rick Scott, he was Governor Rick Scott down in Florida, but grew up in the projects in Kansas City. He said the biggest problem he had when he went from private sector to public sector was this mentality in the government. And he said, stop running in circles. Make sure your effort actually takes you somewhere. And I love this one because you'll meet so many people who you say, hey, how you doing? Oh, I'm busy. Really? What are you doing? They're running. So at the end of the day, they're right back in the same spot, only now they're exhausted. Right? That's running in circles. He said, if you're going to do something, make sure your efforts are actually taking you somewhere, that you have goals that you say, okay, today I'm right here. I'm going to be busy all day, just like everybody else. I'm not going to run in circles. I'm going to make sure that everything I do takes me to where I want to be at the end of the day. And actually, at the end of the day, I'm exhausted just like everybody else, only now I'm here when I was back there where everybody else was. That's simple stuff, right? We all know this stuff, but sometimes you just need to hear it in a different way, and that's what was so valuable about this one. And this one comes up time and time again. I love this quote. It's successful people do the things the failures fail to do. Successful people do the things the failures fail to do. How do you act each and every day when nobody else is around? Are you putting in the extra work? All these kind of tie together, right? Sports psychologist who works with professional athletes put it this way. He said, the primary difference between amateurs and pros is daily habits. You start to meet these famous people and these people who have gone from here to here, and you start to see that they do the same things. It's the same roadmap for almost every one of these people. Simple things like they all say prayer and meditation. And I'm horrible at this, by the way, let's be honest. I get up in the morning and I think I got to put out 35 fires, right? I get up and I start running, I take off, and I really don't know why. My wife is great at this. She gets up extra early. She spends the extra time to pray and get her mind right before she starts the day. So she knows, okay, I have all this coming up. I'm going to tackle these in effective manners. Almost every single person that I've been able to interview talks about goal setting. Making sure you're setting not only 1, 5, and 10-year goals, but each and every day you step back and say, am I on the right path? And many of you may have heard this when the problem with so many people today is they say they have big goals, but they're afraid to take action. And it's the analogy of you're in New York City, you want to get to Los Angeles. You say, I want to be out there, but I'm here, but I'm not going to take off until every single light is green all the way to Los Angeles. So what do? They wait. Well, one of my mentors said, here's how you need to look at that. You're never going to have every green light all of the way. So as soon as the first light turns green, you go. You take action. You're going to run into a detour. All of a sudden, wow, you've been taken down here. You're suddenly in Dallas. Okay, but my goal is still Los Angeles. You'll eventually get there. But once you get there, you look back and you say, look at all the new experiences I got along the way. Look at all the new people I was able to meet along the way. But too many people get caught up in saying, I'm never going to start until I can see the finish, and it's got to be easy. It's never going to be easy. It's never been easy for anybody. The extra reading, we hear that all the time. This one always blows me away too. 60% of people will never read another book after they graduate from school, whether it's college or high school. They never pick up another book. 60%. That's the numbers that are out there by the Reading Foundation. 60% will never, ever pick up another book. And then they wonder, well, why am I not more effective with my family? Have you read a book on being a good parent? Why am I not more effective at my job? Have you read a book on management? I mean, there are places out there, the recent inventions, but they're called libraries, right? It's not even expensive. You can go buy and pick one up, and all the knowledge of all these times and these people have put down on paper, you can pick those up and move yourself forward. And the cost is nothing. And then diet. All the successful people I've interviewed have a commitment to diet and exercise. So again, when you start to hear these things time and time again, you start to think, there might be something to this. I was going to leave this one out, but I love this guy so much, I love telling this story. Excellence is the key to success. And this is one of those, when I talk to organizations, I often say, do you guys have a commitment to excellence here? Is everything at such a level that when people walk in and you meet them that they say, boy, there's something different about this place? This goes to an interview I did with Lou Holtz. I've interviewed him several times. Legendary coach of Notre Dame. And he said, you know what, John? Practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. And he said, here's how it plays out for us. People will be on the sidelines watching us practice. And they'll see a play and they'll say, that was pretty good. But in the midst of that, of running the play, he said, I'll blow the whistle because it wasn't perfect. He said, so we will do it time and time again until it is perfect. Because it has to be ingrained in your mind. This is how I perform when everything falls apart. If you convince your mind, I know exactly how to react in all situations because you've been practicing perfectly, when everything is breaking loose, whether it be on the football field, whether it be at work, you know how to react because you practice in a perfect fashion time and time again. And he said, when it becomes natural, you don't have to worry, right? You don't have to think about it when the stress is on. Your body just reacts in a perfect fashion. And he went on, and this is the nugget that I love to keep in, and this is one of the reasons I love talking about this. He says, because excellence not only becomes the culture, it becomes the expectation. He said, think about it. If I convince my team to perform in such an excellent fashion, I don't always have to be there. If they've bought into this, then they'll blow the whistle on themselves. So if I'm gone one day, they're running a play, and one of the players does it wrong. He said, whoa, stop guys, I messed up. It wasn't perfect. I want to get it right. How do you think the rest of the team reacts to that? They're like, right, we're with you, man. We all want to be perfect. We're here to support you. How about that in an organization? When the boss is gone, boss doesn't have to worry because they know that this culture has permeated everything, that they can be gone and the organization will still be run in a perfect fashion. I'm telling you, 5 minutes with Lou Holtz will change your life for 50 years. It's unbelievable. And you see somebody who incorporates these philosophies, excellence, it's got to become the culture, right? It's got to become the expectation. 5 minutes with him, can you imagine spending all the time that these players had? He changed so many lives over the course of his career by preaching these things time and time again. Next one here, don't let the opinion of others define you. And you guys may have seen the promotional video that we played a little bit ago. And I didn't used to talk about this because it all kind of became clear later on, really within the past couple of years, why this one's so impactful, not only in my life, but I think in others as well. You see, I moved around a lot, 20 different towns, all in Missouri before I graduated from college. We bounced around a lot of different reasons. And I missed a lot of stuff. Right? That was back in the 70s and 80s when there wasn't standardized education where you learn things in a certain order across the state. I bounced around and I missed stuff because one school would be teaching this, another school would be teaching this. So I got to a school in the 4th grade and they had me tested. And I wasn't a very good reader. And I wasn't very good at math either. So what do? They put me in the slow class. And so that started to permeate my mind. I'm slow, right? John Cena right here said, people tried to label him as so many things over. By the way, we used that as a Christmas card one year. There's Sophie, there's Lauren, there's my wife, John Cena. He said, so many people over the years tried to label me as something that I didn't think I was. And the hardest thing that I have to do is not to believe what they said about me, but to believe what I think about me. He said, people tried to label me as just a wrestler. He said, I didn't see myself that way. I saw myself as a multimedia superstar and business owner. He said, because if I believed what they had to say about me when my wrestling career was over, I was over. But I knew when my wrestling career finished, and now it's back again, he said, when my wrestling career was over, then I knew I had another platform. So he had set goals after the initial goal, which is so important. Kurt Warner, we all remember his story, right? Went to college up in Iowa, played in the Arena Football League, but was bagging groceries at a Hy-Vee grocery store. And he told me, he said, if I believed what other people said about me, I would still be bagging groceries at a Hy-Vee grocery store because people said, you're washed up. You're a has-been. You used to be a football player. He said, but the whole time I'm working at the Hy-Vee, I'm thinking, no, that's not me. That's not what God has in mind for me. I am a Super Bowl winning MVP quarterback. I'm not just a grocery bagger. That's what I'm doing right now, but that's not what I am. And he told me, he said, the problem is, as you're in that, it can be so frustrating because you're not fulfilling your potential and everybody else is telling you what they think you are. And why do they do that? Because if I can define you as something, I can put you in a box and it takes the pressure off me of having to think about you. He said, so when I would talk to these coaches, they could just check me off immediately because, oh, you're just a bagger at Hy-Vee. Next. But that's not what he had in mind. And we all know how that story came out, right? He believed in himself. But the other part of this story is that a lot of people forget, had Trent Green not gotten injured and Kurt Warner not been in a place with a system that worked exactly to fit his skills, he wouldn't have been a Super Bowl winning MVP. Right? So don't believe how they label you. So somewhere along the ways, they labeled me as a slow child. They said, well, let's put him in the remedial classes. He's not a very good reader. He doesn't know his math. right? They weren't being mean. They were doing what they were supposed to do. They were teachers. They said, the kid can't read, he can't do his math, let's move him over here to the slow class. And here's the interesting thing about the slow class. The slow class at this particular school was down between the nurse's station and the lunchroom. It was more or less in a mop closet, which was kind of a preview of coming attractions. Now I can look back and say. So they put me in this room and they had me reading stuff that was like for little kids. You know, I'm in 4th grade and they're giving me little books and I'm like, I don't think I'm stupid. But that's how they labeled me, right? You can't read, you can't do your math, so you must be slow. Let's put you over here. My mother, years later, came up and said, you know what's so weird about that, John, is that we had your IQ tested and your IQ was incredibly high. I'm like, well, I wish you would have told me that at that time, right? Maybe I would have believed what you had to say, not the fact that the teacher labeled me as slow. And people have asked me, were you mad at the teacher? I said, no. Why would I be mad at her? She didn't do it to be mean. She was just doing her job because that's how she perceived me. The kid can't read. He can't do math. He must be slow. So I believed this. I believed this for a long time. So as I got older and I look back, so why did I go through that program at Central Methodist University? Because it was the hardest program. And I think in hindsight, even though I had no interest in going into medicine, I wanted to prove to people that I wasn't slow. Right? And we all get labeled. You're just the kid from the small town. You can never make it. You're just the fat kid. You're just the short kid. You're just, right, fill in the blanks. We've all been labeled by somebody else, but does it get backed up with reality? The fact is, I was smart. The reality is, that was not me. But somebody told me that, so I believed it. One of my mottos in the news business is always question the source, because everybody's trying to spin. Always question the source. So these things that we come to believe about ourselves, who is the source of who told you that? Who told you you're just a small town kid? Who told you, oh, you're just from Missouri, you're competing against these Ivy League kids, you'll never make it? Really? Is that the reality? Because in the books that I've written, I found out time and time again, greatness can come from anywhere. There are tons of amazing people who have come from Missouri who didn't buy into this whatever belief that we can't make it because they're from the Midwest. They've risen to the highest levels of all sorts of fields because they didn't believe it. So all these things, I said, that's why you got to journal this stuff and get it all figured out, because whoever told you that, you need to find out, is that reality? Is that backed up by what's really going on in my life? Many times you'll find out it's not. And then my pastor mentor, when I was talking with him one time about this, he said, you know what your problem is, John? You say always question the source. The source that called you slow was a teacher. You never questioned your real source. He said, who's your real source? You're a child of God. Did God make a slow kid? No, he made you to be all that he wants you to be in whatever field it is. He wants you to reach that God-given potential. You just have to find it. So maybe the right source is to question the man upstairs, right? And here's one that he also gave me. He said, use these difficulties and failures as motivation. A lot of us get bitter. Well, somebody called me that. Well, so? Use that difficulty as your motivation. Right? Question the source. Why do they say that? Use those things. You know, we've all heard, don't get bitter, get better, right? I mean, that's one of the keys, because a lot of times the person who labeled it just didn't do it to be mean. They were just doing what they were supposed to, like that teacher. And one of the more interesting things here, and you may have seen this in the video, one of the coolest things of all is the same school that labeled me as slow. I told you I've written 6 books. My very first book was called Missouri Legends. It's all the famous people from Missouri. It's now being taught in 4th grade classes and 3rd grade classes around the state of Missouri. The same school that labeled me as slow now uses that book as their textbook. Right? How cool is that? That, oh, you're teaching the slow kids book. It's pretty cool, because I used all this as motivation to keep climbing and keep trying to get the most that God wanted from my life. But again, I had to question the source. Who was that source? Dave Ramsey has become a friend over the years. I know they teach the class here. He said this when he said, the best witness you can have is to live a life that others want to emulate. He said, when you have that kind of life, you don't have to so-called witness to people, right? They'll see you and say, I don't know what that guy has right there, but I want to be like him. He said, think of how hard it is to present the gospel to a hostile nation. You go up to somebody, doors get closed. That's tough. However, when somebody says, hey, I don't know what you got going on, but tell me your story. You talk about an open door. That's somebody you can say, you know what, it's the love of God who's been working in my life, doing everything I can to become all that God wants me to be. They just opened a huge door, and it's simple as that. Live the kind of life that others want to emulate. And that means, all these basics again. You don't major in the minor stuff. You keep your integrity. If you say you're going to do something, you do it. Don't be the person who gets known at work as, oh, he said he would take care of it. Somebody else, who's going to do it? Don't become that person. That means treating people the right way. Right? This is all really basic stuff, but when they see the church crowd coming at the restaurant, do they say, oh, here comes the church crowd, right? Or do they say, here comes the church crowd. They're going to treat us like human beings that we are. They're going to tip well. They're going to do all this stuff. Let's get excited about the church crowd, right? Treat people the right way. That means demanding more from yourself than anybody else ever could demand from you. When you live a life like that, you don't have to worry about having a boss because they could never expect as much from you as you expect from yourself. And then after all the ups and downs, the sleepless nights, the long days, somebody will come up to you and they'll say, wow, you sure got lucky. What you find out is overnight success typically takes about 15 years to accomplish. You see these flash in the pan overnight successes because of social media, because of that darn media, right? We see this stuff all the time, but what you find time and time again is you don't see those nights when they stayed up all night working on themselves, working harder on themselves than they did on their job. What you will see is after 15 years, people come up and say, hey, I don't know how you did it. You probably got lucky along the way. They don't know that you were just standing on these biblical principles. What they'll see is a life worth emulating. What they'll see after 15 or so years, they'll see somebody who's doing things the right way to become all that God planned for their life. What they'll see is the goodness of God's love living through us, helping others around us, and shining through, which to me is the best witness you can ever have, like I said. That to me is the true definition of success. But again, it all starts with first actions. Back to the first principle, it's not that hard, right? Work in the natural, let God take care of the supernatural, do everything you can, and then God will be allowed to do his part in your life. So again, I hope you got something out of the talk today. I hope that you got that one nugget that we can all call this a big success, and that you're able to incorporate that nugget into your life. And you never know. After all these years, 15, 20 years, you get a call from Pastor Tim. He says, I'm going to be gone. John, you've had a great deal of success. We need you to come give a free speech. And here you might be. Thank you guys for having me here today. Appreciate it. Jerry, thank you.